Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us. We have with us right now the couple at the center of the film We Began to Sing and the filmmaker. Filmmaker is Polly Wells. Hi, Polly, how are you?
Hello, great to be here.
And the couple in the film and in front of us now are Annie Patterson and Peter Blood. How are you two?
Hi, doing good.
Are you in Western Mass right now?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are.
Okay, so thanks for joining us. Looking forward to talking to you about this film. Why don't we just go ahead right off the bat and talk a little bit about Pete Seeger. Um, I guess my first question for you is, what was it like when you first got to know him and he became part of your life? I mean, obviously he was, he, for so many people of your generation and subsequent generations, essentially represented the idea of community singing that this film is all about. And he actually came into your lives. So rather than rehashing the details of how that happened, tell me about the emotions of having that happen.
You know, Pete Seeger is sort of an iconic figure for a lot of people. I think he had a way of being just personable from the stage, so you felt like you knew him.
Yeah.
So Peter was the one who started to work with him first through Sing Out magazine, and then we both got to work with him because he was on our song selection committee for Rise Up Singing. And there was always, for me, a feeling of just being in the presence of somebody awesome. And I think for Peter, you can speak for yourself, but I think you and Pete were more simpatico in a way. Very similar people in some ways.
It's interesting the way you worded your question, because when you said come into your life, the amazing thing about Pete is that he came into the lives of literally millions of people throughout the world who never had a chance to meet him. And even of the people who met him, he was so available that many, many thousands of people kind of got to have what you would call deep personal contacts with him that he probably couldn't even remember had happened. And he really entered my life when I was in high school in this indirect sense. I was a budding young song leader and musician, and I had a bunch of his albums. I got to see him in a concert when I was in high school. And I felt like he was a kind of almost like a mythic figure for me in my heart, in my sort of spiritual life. And I didn't think I would probably ever meet him in person. And when I was working on a book before Rise Up Singing, I actually got his phone number and called him up and said, we're trying to make this sing-along book, and all the big companies just say, oh, we'll sue you if you use our songs. And he said, don't bother to ask. They'll only say no.
Right.
And anyway, we kind of followed that advice. But then later on, we really wanted to have it be legal. And so we did approach the group the magazine that he founded in 1950 called Sing Out, about being the publisher. And he was 100% behind that. And really helped, his publisher helped the book to happen by getting us a lot of permissions. But a few years later, his publisher, his manager wanted him to have a book about his songs because everybody was assuming his songs were public domain. And so he said he would do the book if they asked me to be the editor, which is a great honor. And so I was the editor of his autobiography, this book. And it was just amazing working with him for about a year on that book.
Yeah, great. Polly, you want to tell me a little bit about your own relationship to this? I mean, besides knowing Annie and Peter and wanting to make a film about them, what's your own personal relationship to the singing culture and to Pete Seeger and the folk revival era? And what does it mean to you, or what did it mean to you when you decided to start making this film?
Well, I think it all started in the most meaningful way when I got to know a Quaker family in Pennsylvania who a family that sang around the dinner table all the time. And I just found myself entranced by that experience. That had never happened in my family growing up. And it really stirred something in me and made me feel really different, like I belonged in some way, you know. It was quite profound. And that same family sent me home with these songbooks that Peter had helped create. He was just describing, well, this was Winds of the People era.
I worked on that too, but that was
Oh, did you? I didn't.
Yeah, that was Peter's.
Yeah, okay. And so I just kind of, it was part of my life in that I wanted to be singing with people. But it was many years before I realized, and I by that time become a filmmaker and working in broadcasting and so on. And it took a long time for me to want to make a film about it, but it all started around that dinner table.
And this was like at roughly what age for you?
I was probably in my late 20s. It was around 1980, 79, 80.
Yeah. Okay.
When I was just starting my film career. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And Pete Seeger was just a name I knew growing up, and I loved folk music, and but the idea of singing collectively was spawned really that in those experiences.
Right. So let's talk about that as it applies, or if it applies to the current era. Obviously, we're in kind of another era of profound activism.
Mm-hmm.
Like the era that everybody thinks of, you know, associated with Pete and his generation, the 60s and, you know, et cetera. However, we also live in a very much of a fragmented culture where everybody's got their own silos of entertainment and all of that. And there isn't a whole lot of communal singing happening necessarily in the current culture, although you two are conducting some of that still. Do you want to talk about? But on the other hand, I've been to a few protests, and you know, people do. There's chanting, and sometimes singing breaks out, and sometimes it's hip hop, not you know, folk music or whatever. But it does happen. Tell me about your hopes and what you see in real life today in terms of activism and music.
Well, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so I think singing has become something that people crave and they grieve for, and they're just sort of trying to figure it out. But, you know, up until the pandemic started and continuing in different ways now are hundreds of sing-alongs that meet every month, and people can find out about those on our website. So people are still doing it. And a lot of those groups, I would say, you know, they go from wanting to do it because they're interested in social justice, and some of them are just, you know, interested in folk music. But I think Pete Seeger is a thread. He's a real thread between a lot of that. And I know Peter would have things to say about this, but I do think that in terms of activism today, we do need to listen to the voices that have come before, because there's a lot of wisdom there. And Pete, more than anybody, knew that a simple, repetitive chorus that had a catchy phrase sung over and over again was going to work a whole lot better than a story that is a ballad with 5 different verses, or songs with metaphors are going to work much better at a protest than in your face kinds of things. So yeah, in fact, we were just talking about this the other day, the song about Ella Baker, Sweet Honey in the Rock, We Who Believe in Freedom. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. That one line has been sung over and over again at a lot of protests, but not any of the other part of the song.
So, Peter, I want you to address the question too, but I think I want to jump in for a second and just ask, to what extent, I guess when I'm talking about contemporary activism, I'm thinking about the younger generation that's in the streets right now. To what extent have you seen them willing to engage in the, traditional folk singing process, kind of why I mentioned the hip hop thing earlier. But to what extent are you finding that young people are joining these groups that are still carrying out the sing-alongs and those kinds of events?
I think the attendance at the kind of regular sing-alongs that often use our songbooks that Annie was talking about by young people is pretty limited. In certain places it happens, but I think that there is gradually becoming more singing in the sort of among young people, among the sort of current activist culture, like in the streets. There's a woman named Melanie Demore, for instance. She's not particularly young herself, but some of her songs work really, really well at a rally. And so I know an activist leader named Jay O'Hara who does a lot of climate work. And whenever he does an action, he always gets people singing some of these really catchy short songs that are new songs. Actually, they're not the old freedom songs that I might have used before or something like that, or old anti-war songs.
Mm-hmm.
They're ones that have been written by young people in many cases today that are often simple, have the same kind of zipper quality of something you don't need the words to sing. And I think that those are catching on at things like Extinction Rebellion rallies and places like that. So I don't think that movement singing in the streets is by any means dead yet, although it's a little bit threatened.
But I do think that what the whole point of the film is that it is singing together is an incredible tool, and it drives connection, and it's just a great thing to be able to do and to bring any group of people together. So it's kind of reminding people of the power of it. And I also think, even though we can't sing as much now, the film is really about believing in hope and believing in the future. And singing gives you that feeling. And when you sing with other people, that is when you feel the possibilities of the future. So I think it's actually it's unfortunate that we're in a pandemic, God knows, but it's a very hopeful film, and we've gotten a lot of reaction that it just feels so good to watch a film that's so uplifting and positive, because it is something, and it's something we can all do. Everybody can participate in this kind of singing. So it's very timely, I think, in a sort of unpredictable way. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And at a time when hope is kind of in short supply right now, right? So this kind of singing together does give people that sense of community and spirit that we are, sort of sorely, lacking or wishing for right now, right?
Yeah, and also this message that Pete was so strong on is that, change takes time, and you just have to keep at it, don't give up. And the only way to change is to do it together, like come together, and singing is about that. So it's very, very much on point these days, I think.
Annie and Peter, do you have thoughts specifically about just like sort of biologically, psychologically, what happens to us when we sing together?
Yeah, oh yeah. There's a vibration that happens when you sing within your body, something I've studied for many years. And that vibration, which is so good and really healthy for your body, you cannot, it's really interesting. I mean, people do put singing bowls on top of their bodies to get the same kind of effect, but in a group, you're raising the energy, you're connecting on so many other levels as well. And I think it is something that people miss right now, is they don't get to have that harmony with each other that fills a room. But what Polly said is so important. The vibration that you're kind of, having happen as you sing, even if you're singing like at one of our sing-alongs that we do online, you might be in your home by yourself, but that vibration that you're doing, it's a significant healing thing to do. It really.
Even on Zoom.
Yeah, because what we do is we acknowledge that we're in community together. We've been building a community on Mondays online of people from all over the world that come and they sing with us. And we get them to put in the chat, where are you? How are you feeling? And sometimes we'll do like an all request day. And the idea is, even if you're by yourself, you're still getting that vibration.
We're actually doing a series of 5 concerts to get people energized and full of hope about the election cycle.
In the States.
So we're doing it's called a Sing Out the Vote series, and we're doing 5 concerts in different swing states around the country. And like Annie said, you're not going to be able to all sing together, but at least in the set you can sing all together, but you have to sing by yourself at home along with us, really. And we provide ways that people can do that. But I think the key is that music reaches a level below the mind. It goes into a kind of a heart level. And I can't tell you how many people over the years, literally hundreds, have come up to us and said, my life was changed by singing with Pete Seeger. And I think the reason why their life changed radically was that messages that were out there in other ways, through reading or through talking, didn't quite get through. But when they heard those messages sung, they got through at a deeper level.
Yeah.
And so they realized maybe they were empowered to make a change in their life, or maybe they realized that they were more caring about issues like other people's suffering than they were before. So music absolutely, particularly singing with a group of people, definitely transforms people's relationship with each other and with their own heart.
Maybe for my last question, I'm interested to hear from the two of you, and Polly, if she wants to weigh in on this one, about your the origins of your listening habits. So obviously, we know your connection with Pete. Peter, do you go back to the folk revival period of like sort of the very late 50s and early 60s, the coffee house period? Were you listening to folk music then? And if so, who did you love besides Pete Seeger, obviously?
Well, I definitely was. I didn't so much go back to the 50s. I'm not quite that old, though I probably look that way. But I definitely go back to, my family did sing together, but they sang together stuff like from musicals, things like that, Broadway musicals. But in the 60s, I loved Peter, Paul and Mary, Joan Baez, Judy Collins, Phil Oakes, all that kind of genre of people, right. James Taylor, and so on. And the thing is that I found that at that particular time, that created a kind of culture across my whole generation that was, very integrated in the civil rights movement, in the peace movement, that kind of thing. I'm not sure that's happening quite the same way today. There's a little bit more of a tendency to just listen to stuff. I mean, YouTube is amazing because people can watch music anywhere in the world and get excited about it without having to buy records or go to concerts. So I think music travels much, much more quickly, but you don't have quite the same tendency to sing with a bunch of people together as there was before.
And as far as the mainstream culture goes, I mean, in that period that you're talking about, Peter, Paul and Mary was top 40. So everybody, your parents' generation, grandparents, the kids were all listening to the same thing and hearing and enjoying Peter, Paul and Mary together. And now, as I mentioned earlier, we just live in a fragmented society culturally where everybody has their own pocket of interest, and it's harder to make a mass produced piece of art that everybody can agree on and enjoy together. Whereas that was clearly true whether it was Peter, Paul and Mary or the Beatles in the 60s. Right. Polly, do you want to answer that at all? Like, where do your music interests typically lie, and to what extent are they in the folk world or, folk records outside of Pete Seeger?
Well, I'm a little younger than Peter, but I basically listened to the same cast of characters that he mentioned. Certainly Peter, Paul and Mary when I was 10. I remember that, discovering them. And I think up until I kind of moved to New York City in my late 20s, I was kind of still in the folk genre pretty much. I'd say Leonard Cohen, that kind of, not folky so much, but that general thing.
Pretty folky, but darker and not sort of topical. Yeah. Right.
And then I kind of wasn't doing much music for a long time. So I have sort of developed all sorts of eclectic interests. But when I started singing again, as a result of doing this film, I found a way to sing in community for the first time, really consistently. I went back to the folk genre just because it's so accessible, and it's a pretty broad, singer-songwriter, contemporary singer-songwriters and the folk community is a very broad, encompassing genre, I think. So I've really loved getting up to speed on what's happening now and listening to that music again. It's very, very nourishing to me.
Mm-hmm. And then Annie, why don't you have the last word? I was just going to say, you have spent an awful lot of your life making music, but where do your tastes lie? I'm sure there's plenty of, pretty much just total overlap with what Peter was talking about, but what else? Like sort of,
well,
maybe what's unusual about some of your musical, like what tangents have you gone off on,
Yeah, I mean, I have siblings that were similar generation as Peter, but I'm quite a bit younger. So I grew up during the, Bonnie Raitt, Taj Mahal was big. A lot of us listened to Jackson Browne and Joni Mitchell, of course.
And no offense, Peter, but I was basically assuming that Annie was a little bit younger than you.
Oh, that's just a compliment to me.
She just swears well. She's actually 78 years old.
Yeah, exactly. But I was a radio DJ, and I spent a lot of time doing a folk show that broadened my horizons. And I knew I really liked old-timey music, so I listened to Ola Belle Reed and Libba Cotton and Hetty West and banjo players, Hazel Dickens, Alice Gerrard. A lot of tangents, as you put it. I veered off and really wanted to know more about old ballads. And then I got asked to be in a swing band when I was in my 20s. And so then I started to learn a lot of Ella Fitzgerald and swing tunes and jazz standards. So I would call my music taste very eclectic because, we have a son who went through his thrasher period, and I just made it, my business to listen to whatever my kids loved, including hip hop. And now we have a son who's a hip hop artist. And so, yeah, we I think once you step into that place of being interested in music and realizing it's a universal language, you can be open to so much. And that's what I love about this film is I think it helps us realize that maybe Pete Seeger's a touchstone, but the film just, it really shows how that touchstone can open you into so many other genres and just that community, thing that music can do for you.
The amazing thing about Pete Seeger is he loved getting out of the silo. What he loved about Rise Up Singing is it wasn't just folk music. Wow. And he helped us to make our new book, even though he didn't live till it came out. And the new book has like country and blues and jazz in whole sections of the book. And the cool thing about YouTube today is people break out of the silos. They start listening to music that they didn't think they liked. And we have on our website, riseupandsing.org, something called the Music Box. It has 3,000 songs in it. And you can listen to people from all different genres singing the same song. It may be a country person singing the song and a folk person singing the song, and even somebody completely different.
I think the movie does a great job kind of exploring why Pete Seeger really liked all kinds of different music. He's much more of a complicated person than people might realize. And I love that.
Kind of an ethnographic musician as well.
Right.
He started early in his life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like Frank Ocean. I just want to mention that.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
My sons would be happy with that. With that. That's good.
I also have a daughter who's
Yeah.
teaching me about good music.
Sure. Right. You can find it in a lot of places. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk. Those of you watching, if you're coming to this chat before watching the film, you can watch We Began to Sing as part of our Committed to Memory shorts film block all week, starting with our festival on Friday, the 18th through Thursday, the 24th. You can watch it at any time. And if you want to see the live Q&A with Polly and the filmmakers of the other films that are in the Committed to Memory shorts block, tune in on Saturday afternoon.
It's Sunday, isn't it?
Sunday, I'm sorry, right, Sunday. Yes, thank you. The other shorts block, another one of the shorts blocks is Saturday. Thanks for correcting me. Great to meet you all on Zoom, and we look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon, hopefully. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you, James. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Study one more, study one more, study one more, study one more, study